A big question that many Dune fans have had ever since Denis Villeneuve signed on to direct the franchise is how will he depict the Spacing Guild Navigators? While we haven't seen them yet in the first two films, the source material for Dune Messiah is where readers get their first official description of one of these navigators, Edric, who goes on to take a prominent role in the story. It is interesting to note that in Dune, they do say the guild is so private. So I was fine with there not being a navigator then because in the actual story, we don't see that late stage navigator yet. We just see the guild representatives that are on their way to becoming less human, I guess, looking, with the helmets filled with that orange spice gas. So we saw the beginnings of a navigator, but now you need to show one. And it would be nice if they did show the navigator actually working to see how these highliners fold space and how the navigators foresee those safe paths, especially with Paul's story at this time, because he is the Kwisatz Haderach and he is grappling with seeing the future. He's seeing multiple pathways. And I think that would just be one other facet of prescience. If we see prescience at work in the navigators and just a small taste of what Paul Atreides sees. So in this article, it talks about that fans expect Villeneuve's live-action depiction of a navigator to resemble the heptapod aliens from Arrival, as vague human shapes floating in a tank. In fact, given Villeneuve's love for the Dune novels, the navigators may have even inspired his vision for his 2016 sci-fi classic. Moreover, the same Academy Award-winning production designers behind Arrival are also responsible for designing both the sandworms and the navigators in Dune. So I didn't know that, or if I did, I forgot that it's the same production designers who worked on the sandworms, and I love the sandworm design, so that's exciting. And that is one thing I often pointed to when I would say, like, come on, Denis, let's dive into the strange and weird of Dune. You've shown that you can do that in a very captivating and awesome way that is very striking. Denis Villeneuve's style for Dune so far, it has been minimalist in a lot of ways. But then there are other times where it's just so visually captivating. There are just these moments, like in Dune Part 2, where it opens with the eclipse sequence. I love that. Of course, the whole Getty Prime sequence under the black sun, very unique and very striking visual interpretation of the Harkonnen homeworld, and kind of fits within that hyper-industrialist aesthetic. So it fit really nice, I thought. And of course, with the end, with the atomics, I think that is also a nice tease for what we can expect for the Stoneburner event in Dune Messiah. So I think the potential for those striking images, which is the kind of filmmaking that he likes to do, he likes to speak more through images. I am hopeful that we will see a very striking visual interpretation of the navigators. And that's interesting too, because I didn't think about that the heptapod aliens from Arrival could have been inspired by the navigators. We have this scene right here that is very mysterious. Your mind can definitely go to seeing that same team take their shot at a navigator. Say what you will about David Lynch's version. He certainly took some creative liberties there, but he had the guts to showcase Saint Elia of the Knife. He wasn't afraid to get weird. One of my favorite scenes of David Lynch's version of Dune is when the Emperor is meeting with the guild. We see this full stage 3 navigator. That was something that was new, and something that Frank Herbert actually incorporated into his later novels was this idea of different stages of navigators. So it's really fascinating where David Lynch's imagination went in portraying this particular navigator, because these used to be humans. These are humans. There aren't aliens in Dune, unless you count the sandworms, I guess, or who put them on Arrakis. But mostly it is humans who are undergoing these strange changes to themselves through intense mental or physical conditioning, or through genetic experimentation, or in this case, this prolonged exposure to the spice has so mutated these humans that they become almost like a fish, a humanoid fish. And that's what Edric is described as in Dune Messiah, is a humanoid fish in a strange sea. So he's floating in this orange gas of spice. And it's really cool to think about where Denis Villeneuve will go as far as his visual interpretation of it. How much of Edric looks human? Because David Lynch just went full on, completely different, so far removed from humanity. But in Dune Messiah, it does seem like it's described as humanoid, but with fish-like appendages, those fanned, webbed hands. So not that far along from humanity. So it will be interesting to see how Villeneuve decides to interpret it. Will it look so far out there like David Lynch, so far removed from what used to be a human? Or will we see more human-like appearance? So we'll actually know that it's a human that has been so mutated by the spice to look like this. So I'm very intrigued by that possibility. In the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, I thought that they did a very good job with their interpretation, which they actually had a couple of different visual interpretations. In the first series of Dune, it almost looked bat-like. It had wings, and very different from how Edric looks in the Children of Dune sequel series. Much more of a humanoid, but very much fish-like. But I did like that interpretation better than the one that they had in the Dune miniseries. I think that was more closely resembled to the description in the book, but it was cool to see both of those interpretations. It was really cool that they showed it in the Dune miniseries. They did say that the Spacing Guild is jealous of their privacy, and you can endanger your shipping privileges trying to spot a navigator. So definitely now circumstances are so desperate, they're having to out themselves and take a more direct role in the events of the Empire because they are so threatened by Paul and his utter control of the spice. So they don't like that. And I like the tank design. They very much went leaning more on the humanoid side, but also, this is humanoid fish. As far as an adaptation goes to the story, that is the best interpretation. And it made some changes too, but as far as the core story, it did a very good job, but also just those little things too, as far as world building and lore. They really dived into the details. And I think it speaks to the fact that the series is actually called Frank Herbert's Dune. So they really did strive to adhere to the spirit of his story. They did their best with what they had, their very limited TV budget. I could do without some of the hats, but it has some great performances in there. It's definitely my favorite, Lady Jessica with Saskia Reeves and Chani, Barbara Kordotova. When it comes to adaptation, that's the best adaptation. If you're looking in terms of cinematic, then Denis Villeneuve's. It was just awesome that David Lynch decided to go there in his movie, in his version. It was a scene that was original to the movie. It wasn't from the source material, but in a sense it was, because it did establish how important the guild is to the Empire and how civilization works. So I really did like that. I appreciated that he included it. And the way the Dune miniseries handled it was the characters themselves didn't see the navigator. It was just us, the viewer, getting clued in on how navigation and space travel worked. So the characters around you don't see it. We saw how it worked after it was established that no one gets to see a navigator. They love their privacy. I think that was a cool way to handle it. But when it comes to Villeneuve's interpretation, he did have that sneak peek of an early stage navigator for the Emperor's Procession in Dune Part 1. But there definitely needs to be some making up for their omission in Part 2 as far as how much of a role that they play in the socio-political landscape and commerce and trade and just all of civilization. We could have maybe not a lore dump, but the way that has been done so far with these movies is there is a little bit of exposition. So we had a little bit from Chani in Dune Part 1 to preface that, and then we had a little bit from Princess Irulan in Dune Part 2 to kind of reestablish where we were in the story. And if they do it with Aaliyah, I think that would be really cool. If they set up the story and the world and reestablish where we are in the universe with the characters, and maybe her establishing what went on in the wake of Paul's rise to power. So maybe showing that with his utter control of the spice, he had utter control of the Bene Gesserit, taking away their religious manipulation as well, shutting down their breeding program, and the guild, that Paul has power over them, has power over the entire empire because of his control of the spice. And I think you can wrap that up very quickly. I don't think you have to do this huge lore dump. He did tease it already in Part 1. And Dune Messiah, the opening of it in the book, it does reestablish all those events of what happened at the climax of Dune and what's the ramification of those events with Paul's ascendancy to the throne. So I think that the opening monologue of Dune 3 might be the perfect opportunity to reintroduce the guild and finally show Villeneuve's Navigator. And again, when considering how Villeneuve will visually depict the Navigators, it's likely he'll lean toward an artfully mysterious interpretation, akin to his Arrival aliens, rather than a direct page-to-screen adaptation of a humanoid fish in a tank, somewhat like Abe Sapien from Hellboy. Given Villeneuve's Bene Gesserit-centric approach to these adaptations and his well-documented aversion to dialogue, it seems highly likely that Edric will remain more of a background presence, with other characters referencing his role in obscuring their plans from the Emperor's sight. Regardless, I hope that Villeneuve's Navigators, like so many other elements in his films, will be rendered in breathtaking, awe-inspiring visuals designed for the big screen. But I'm curious to know what you think a good design for Villeneuve's Navigators would be. Do you think something more mysterious like the heptapod aliens from Arrival would work well? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more Dune and other sci-fi and fantasy news, theories, and lore. And if you're looking for other ways to support the channel, you can leave a super thanks or join as a YouTube member for early access to new videos and other perks. You can also check out my Patreon page for exclusive content. Thank you all so much for your support, and as always, have a very nerdy day.